It began with a breakfast, a bowl of oatmeal, and a retired K9 named Diesel, standing frozen in the doorway, not barking, just watching. Within minutes, the nanny was bleeding, the child was screaming, and a father's instincts kicked in. What Diesel did wasn't an attack. It was a warning. And what they discovered in that oatmeal would uncover a hidden past darker than anyone imagined. This isn't just a story about a dog, it's about trust, survival, and a love that never blinks. If you believe animals sense what we can't like and subscribe, you don't want to miss what comes next. The morning had started like any other quiet, uneventful, steeped in the kind of slow rhythm that only comes with small-town life. Noah Jensen stood at the kitchen sink of his two-bedroom home in Wexford, Oregon, rinsing out a sippy cup with one hand and cradling a chipped mug of lukewarm coffee in the other. The faint sound of cartoons played in the background, blending with the occasional squeal of laughter from his 2-year-old daughter, Mia. Sunlight filtered in through the window over the sink, casting long golden stripes across the tile floor and making the air feel warmer than it was. There was a peacefulness to it all, calm, safe, ordinary. Diesel, his German shepherd, lay curled near the refrigerator, his thick coat rising and falling with each measured breath. Retired now, Diesel had once been a decorated K9 trained for detection and protection and had served with Noah during his years in the military. Since their return, Diesel had been more companion than soldier, a shadow that followed Noah silently from room to room. Life wasn't perfect, but it was stable. And for a man who had known the chaos of war, stability was a kind of luxury. Mia sat in her booster seat, tiny feet swinging, curls bouncing as she clumsily spooned banana oatmeal into her mouth. Across from her sat Rebecca Cole, their live-in nanny for the past 7 months. Soft-spoken, punctual, endlessly patient, she had become a fixture in their lives. She was the kind of woman who folded laundry without being asked and knew exactly how to calm Mia's tantrums with a quiet song and a squeeze of the hand. She wore her usual attire, faded jeans, a powder blue hoodie, and that faint floral perfume that lingered even after she left the room. Noah had grown used to her presence, maybe too used to it, but that morning something shifted. Noah turned from the sink just in time to see Diesel rise, not in a stretch or casual shake, but in a slow, deliberate motion. His eyes locked onto Rebecca, his ears rigid, his tail frozen midair. Noah's body tensed instinctively. Diesel didn't move like that unless something was wrong. Very wrong. "Hey, buddy," Noah said cautiously, drying his hands on a dish towel. Diesel didn't blink. At the table, Rebecca leaned forward, coaxing another spoonful toward Mia's smiling mouth. "One more bite for the princess," she chimed sweetly. Then it happened. Diesel lunged, not with a growl or warning bark, but with sudden, terrifying purpose. His paws hit the tile in a blur, and before Noah could shout, Diesel's jaws locked onto Rebecca's forearm, knocking the spoon from her hand. Mia screamed. The bowl clattered. Rebecca shrieked, stumbling backward as Diesel held her, not tearing, not shaking, just holding. Out Noah's voice cracked rough with a command that came from another life. Diesel obeyed instantly, releasing Rebecca and retreating 2 steps. Blood seeped through her hoodie sleeve. Mia sobbed in her booster seat, her cries piercing the quiet like sirens. Rebecca collapsed to the floor, clutching her arm. "He went crazy. I didn't do anything." Noah knelt beside Mia, pulling her close, her small body trembling against his chest. Across the kitchen, Diesel stood still, his eyes no longer on Rebecca, but on the spoon lying on the floor. His chest rose and fell in shallow, controlled breaths. Noah's gaze followed his. The spoon had landed upright, and smeared along the edge was a faint pink residue, something that didn't belong in oatmeal. Something that didn't smell like banana or cinnamon. Outside, a siren wailed, faintly, growing louder. A neighbor must have called. Within minutes, the kitchen filled with responders, EMTs tending to Rebecca, 2 officers at the door, asking questions, and animal control reaching for Diesel's leash. The lead officer, a former colleague of Noah's, spoke gently but firmly. "We have to take him, Noah. It's procedure. 10-day quarantine behavioral review." Noah tried to reason. "He's a trained K9. He's never hurt anyone, not even in combat." "I know," the officer said, "but this wasn't combat. This was a domestic bite. There's paperwork. Diesel didn't resist the leash. He walked quietly out the door, but not before casting one last look toward the table, the bowl, the spoon. Noah's gut twisted. Something wasn't right. That night, after Mia had finally fallen asleep, Noah stood alone in the kitchen holding the spoon inside a sealed evidence bag. The metallic scent still lingered. He didn't know what it was, but he knew Diesel. And Diesel didn't bite unless there was a reason. The house had never felt so small. In the aftermath of the incident, silence returned, but not the kind that brought peace. This silence was loud, a throbbing void that sat between every glance and every unanswered question. The paramedics had already finished tending to Rebecca's arm, the gauze wrapped snugly over the bite marks. She sat on the couch, tear-streaked and shaking, repeating the same phrase like a mantra, "I didn't do anything, I didn't do anything." Mia clung to Noah's chest, her fingers tangled in his shirt, her sobs now reduced to exhausted hiccups. Noah said nothing. He sat in the armchair across the room, his eyes locked on the table. The bowl of oatmeal still sat there, half full, a spoon lying nearby on a folded napkin that one of the EMTs had used to wipe it down. But that was the thing, Noah remembered exactly where the spoon had landed. It had arced across the room after Diesel's lunge, skidding off the edge of the table, striking the counter and finally landing near the pantry. Not on the napkin, not near Rebecca, but right where Diesel had been staring. That look in his eyes, it hadn't been rage or panic, it had been warning. Diesel hadn't gone after a person. He had gone after a moment. A single action that only he had noticed. The officer standing in the corner cleared his throat, his voice careful. "We'll have to file the bite report." "I hate to do it, Noah, but the county's policy is strict." Noah nodded slowly. "You're just doing your job." But his mind was somewhere else. His thoughts kept circling back to the scent. That strange, sharp smell he caught earlier, metallic biting. It hadn't come from the blood or the bandages. It had come from the steam rising off Mia's oatmeal. As the officer filled out the form, Noah stood and walked into the kitchen. He reached into the cabinet for a pair of latex gloves, remnants from his time in field medicine, and pulled one on. Carefully, he picked up the bowl and sniffed again. It wasn't strong, not enough to overwhelm. But it was there, subtle and wrong. Oatmeal wasn't supposed to smell like radiator fluid. "Something wrong?" one of the paramedics asked as she passed behind him. Noah shook his head. "Just cleaning up." She didn't press. He grabbed a Ziploc bag from the drawer, scooped a spoonful of oatmeal inside, and sealed it tightly. Then he grabbed a second spoon, scraped a bit of the residue from the original one, and slipped that into a separate bag. He labeled both with the time and date in his tight military handwriting and tucked them into a lunch cooler in the garage. By the time he returned inside, the animal control van had arrived. Diesel stood beside one of the shelter tech's, leash clipped, but hanging slack, his body calm. Still, his eyes met Noah's, and there was something in them, a weight, a message. "I don't understand this either," Noah whispered under his breath as Diesel was led out the door. Mia whimpered as they watched him go. "Doggy," she murmured. Noah kissed her temple and carried her upstairs, settling her into her crib. But she wouldn't let go of his hand. He stayed there until her eyelids grew heavy and her breathing steadied. Only then did he head back down and pick up his phone. There was one person he trusted with this, Dr. Lauren Grant. She wasn't just a veterinary toxicologist, she was also a former Army field medic, someone who had pulled Noah out of enough situations overseas to warrant a lifelong debt. He didn't text, he called. "Lauren, I have something I need you to look at, off the record, fast." An hour later, he was in his truck, the sample cooler seat-belted in beside him. He didn't want to leave Mia, but he also knew this couldn't wait. He drove the 40 minutes in tense silence, checking his mirrors every few seconds. Muscle memory from old patrol days. At the edge of the neighboring county, he pulled into a small industrial complex where Lauren's lab was tucked between a tile store and a closed-down print shop. She met him at the door in jeans and a ponytail, her expression already halfway between suspicion and concern. "You're carrying that look," she said. "What did you bring me?" He handed her the cooler. "Oatmeal," he said, "for Mia's breakfast." Her eyebrow arched. What am I looking for? Just tell me if it's clean." She didn't ask more. That was the thing about old bonds forged under fire. You didn't need all the details. She took the samples, pulled on gloves, and walked straight back to her testing station. Noah didn't stay. He couldn't. He just thanked her and walked out, the weight of fear building like a knot between his shoulders. At home, the house was still. Rebecca was gone. She'd texted earlier saying she was at urgent care, asking if she should come back the next day. Noah hadn't answered. He couldn't even begin to think about that yet. Instead, he checked on Mia again, then went into the kitchen and stared at the space where Diesel had stood. He knelt down and pressed his palm to the tile as if somehow it might speak back. He wasn't angry. He wasn't confused. He was scared. Because if Diesel had been right, and he always had been, then this wasn't an accident. This wasn't some misfire of training or PTSD. This was a warning, and it had come just in time. That night, Noah sat at the kitchen table, turning the incident over in his head like a puzzle he couldn't solve. Why now? Why Rebecca? Why oatmeal? He pulled out a notebook and began listing possibilities: cleaning supplies, food allergies, accidental contamination. But none of it made sense. There were no new products in the house, no open containers left out, and Rebecca had made the oatmeal herself right there in front of him. But he hadn't watched every second. He'd been rinsing bottles, checking his phone, distracted. It wouldn't have taken more than a second. And Diesel had seen something, or smelled it, something he couldn't ignore. Noah picked up his phone again. Still no word from Lauren. He didn't expect results that fast, but he needed to know. Needed to know whether he'd almost lost his daughter to something hiding in plain sight. As he sat there alone in the dim kitchen with the hum of the refrigerator, the only sound, he realized something else. If the sample came back positive, then everything changed. And if it didn't, he'd still have to find a way to explain why his dog had bitten someone who was supposed to be family. He reached across the table and picked up the plastic spoon again, now sealed in a second Ziploc bag. He held it under his nose, barely an inch away. The metallic note was fainter now, but it was still there. Cold, sharp, wrong. He sealed the bag again and slid it into the drawer. Upstairs, Mia turned in her sleep and Noah rose to check on her. He didn't notice that his phone buzzed a minute later. It was Lauren. She was calling back. And the first thing she said when he finally picked up was, "You were right to be suspicious." Noah stood in the kitchen, the phone pressed to his ear as Lauren's voice came through with a sharpness that cut through the late-night haze. "You were right to be suspicious," she said, her tone no longer casual. "I ran a preliminary GCMS scan. The oatmeal sample contains trace amounts of ethylene glycol." For a few seconds, Noah said nothing, his fingers curling around the edge of the counter as the weight of her words sank in. "That's antifreeze," he said quietly. "Yes," Lauren confirmed, "not much, but enough to be toxic over time, especially to a child." Noah closed his eyes, the image of Mia's face flashing through his mind, her little hands gripping a spoon, her smile full of trust and innocence. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice low. "Positive. The smell you noticed was real. The compound was still active. If she'd eaten just a few more servings like that—" Lauren didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Noah exhaled through his nose, trying to steady himself, but his mind had already leapt ahead. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a freak accident or spoiled food. Someone had deliberately poisoned his daughter's breakfast, and that someone had been standing in his kitchen acting like family for months. "How fresh was the sample when you tested it?" he asked. "Warm," she replied. "Based on the degradation rate, I'd say it was laced within an hour of collection. Maybe less. That's why we caught it." Noah nodded, even though she couldn't see him. His thoughts began organizing into shapes, movement, timeline behavior. Diesel had reacted not to a person, but to that moment. That action. He had sensed it before anyone else. "Can you write this up for me?" Noah asked. "I need something formal." "I can, but listen, if you're planning to report this, you'll need more than a toxicology report. You'll need proof of intent, motive, something that connects her to the poison." "I know," Noah said. "I'm not going to the police yet." He ended the call and stood in the dim light of the kitchen, his reflection staring back at him from the microwave door. There was no anger in his eyes, only clarity. The military had taught him a lot, but most of all it had taught him how to act when trust was broken. He went to the closet and pulled out a small black case, unzipping it to reveal a hard drive and an external monitor cable. He moved to the hallway to the small table near the front door, where a discreet nanny cam was tucked behind a decorative vase. It wasn't new tech, but it was enough. He'd installed it when Mia first started walking more to monitor the entryway than anything else. It had a wide-angle lens and barely caught part of the kitchen, but maybe it had caught something more. He plugged the drive into his laptop, loaded the software, and scrolled back to that morning's footage. It took time, watching the frames click by in silence, the grainy footage speeding up as he searched for anything out of place. Rebecca. No, not Rebecca. Not anymore, moved about the kitchen like she had 100 times before. Calm, routine, smiling. Then he saw it. 7:38 a.m. She reached into her purse, pulled out a small unmarked vial, held it low, and stirred something into the oatmeal. Noah froze the frame. The image wasn't perfect, no label, no clear content, but the motion was unmistakable. She hadn't hesitated, hadn't even looked around. He captured the screenshot, labeled it, and saved it to a folder he quickly encrypted. His hands were steady, but his breathing had changed. This was no longer suspicion. This was evidence. He looked down at his phone, his thumb hovering over the call button for the local precinct. But he stopped. They would ask the same questions Lauren had. Why would a nanny poison a child? What was her motive? Why now Noah had no answers, only more questions. He opened his browser and began searching public records, background checks, license databases, anything he could find on Rebecca Cole. Her employment had come through a third-party agency based out of Kansas. He found their website and scrolled through bland profiles of caregivers, all glowing reviews and polished resumes. None of it added up. Someone like her, so deliberate, so careful, wouldn't make that kind of move unless she was confident no one was watching, unless she'd done it before. Noah leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling as the overhead fan spun in slow, lazy circles. If Diesel hadn't intervened, Mia would have eaten all of that oatmeal. She might have gotten sick, might have died. The thought made his stomach turn. Suddenly, he remembered something: the prescription bottle. Earlier in the rush of everything, Rebecca had left in a hurry. Her hoodie still hung on the wall hook. Her purse had been shoved beneath the umbrella stand. He retrieved it, now opened it, and began sorting through the contents. Most of it was ordinary receipts, gum, a half-eaten protein bar. But near the bottom, tucked beneath the lining, he found it. A white prescription bottle. The label read, "Fluoxetine, prescribed to Emmeline Carter." Noah's heart stopped. That wasn't her name. He pulled out his phone and typed the name into a county records database. A mugshot appeared. Same face, same eyes, but gaunter worn. The article below the image was from Illinois mother sentenced in child neglect case involving intentional underfeeding. He read the details, barely blinking. The woman in his house had used a false identity. She had a history of harming children, and she had been alone with Mia for months. Noah's fingers trembled as he dialed. Detective Erica Monroe picked up on the second ring. "It's Noah Jensen," he said. "We have a serious problem." He told her everything about the toxicology, the footage, the fake identity. She didn't interrupt. When he finished, there was a long pause on the other end. "We'll issue a bolo immediately," she said. "Don't confront her. We'll track her down." But Noah wasn't listening. His eyes had drifted back to the image on his screen. Emmeline Carter. She hadn't vanished. She'd embedded herself. And she was still out there. And now that she knew she'd been exposed, there was no telling what she might do next. Noah sat at his desk in the dim glow of his laptop screen, heart pounding as he replayed the footage again and again. The nanny cam he'd installed months ago, a quiet sentinel tucked above the hallway doorway, had captured more than he hoped. The timestamp read 7:38 a.m., consistent with what Lauren had told him. There she was, Rebecca Cole, or so he thought, walking into frame with a calm, practiced ease. She reached into her purse, unzipped a small compartment, and withdrew a tiny vial, no label, no color, but clearly containing something. She paused. Noah held his breath and poured the contents into Mia's oatmeal bowl. She had stirred carefully, wiped the vial, and zipped it back into her purse without hesitation. Her face never flinched. She looked almost proud. Noah's chest tightened. He leaned forward, zoomed in, and froze the frame's slanted handwriting on the vial cap. He knew that handwriting. He'd seen it on the prescription bottle in her purse, the same handwriting that spelled Malene Carter on the label. He pressed pause again, took a screenshot, and felt a wave of nausea. This was no accident. This was premeditated. This was poison being administered. He shut his laptop and stood pacing the length of the living room where Mia had slept hours earlier. His mind raced. How many mornings had gone by without him noticing? He shoved a hand through his hair. Diesel had reacted. Diesel had seen it before anyone else. Noah's chest tightened at the memory of his dog's warning bark. He'd filed him away as a protector. Now he realized Diesel had been a witness, a guardian, and what he guarded against was real. Noah flipped open his phone and typed Malene Carter again. More records appeared: a conviction in Illinois for child neglect and abuse, sentencing, psychiatric evaluations, parole. He scrolled through a PDF report that included clinical notes, language like attachment disorder, emotional detachment, and calculated behavior. He found a mugshot, same face, same eyes, but colder, more hollow. He closed the browser and sat back down, pressing his palms into his eyes. Malin Cross, Melinda Cross, Rebecca Cole, all one person, one identity string cooked up with forged documents, bypassing background checks from a less than reputable agency. He felt rage start to build, but he swallowed it. Mia was upstairs, safe, for now. He called Detective Monroe again. "It's her," he said flatly. "I've got video, I've got records." There was a pause then. "Send everything you have, I'll get a warrant." He hung up and opened another file on his desktop where he'd been keeping evidence labeled Images Toxicology Results. He linked the footage screenshot with the Flockstein bottle image and zipped them together. He sent them to Erica with a message: "Urgent predatory poisoning." Then he shut his laptop and walked into Mia's room. She was sleeping peacefully, unaware of the storm gathering around her life. He stroked her cheek, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "I got you." Outside, Diesel paced at the window, tail low, ears alert. The dog sensed it too. The infiltrator was still in the house, and she was dangerous. And Noah had only just begun to unravel the mask she wore. Noah pulled into the parking lot of North Star K9 Behavioral Services late in the afternoon, the sun leaning toward the horizon and casting long shadows across the pavement. Diesel sat quietly in the back seat of the truck, his head resting on the center console, eyes alert but calm. Noah hesitated for a moment before opening the door. This was more than an appointment. It was a turning point. He'd seen experts before trainers and veterinarians, but Tessa Ray had served alongside military handlers and had rehabilitated countless service dogs. He trusted her more than anyone. He led Diesel into the clinic, the sharp scent of antiseptic and rubber mingling in the air. Tessa emerged from the inner office, clipboard in hand, wearing worn jeans, a fleece vest, and a welcoming but serious expression. "Noah Jensen?" she asked quietly. He nodded, and she knelt to greet Diesel. The dog responded with a gentle tail wag, his posture relaxed. "He knows you," she observed. Good sign. She walked them through a series of controlled tests, recalling Diesel from distance, introducing unfamiliar people with neutral energy, and observing his interactions with protective toys and food stimuli. Throughout, Diesel appeared measured, precise, calm. The one moment he stood alert and stiff came when Tessa held up a child-sized doll and mimicked placing it on the ground near Noah. Diesel stiffened, growled low and protective, then backed away, not lunging or biting, but watching intently. Tessa made notes on her clipboard. She paused as Diesel walked over on command, sniffed the doll, then looked to Noah. "Notice he never balked at a command," she said softly. "His behavior is consistent with a dog trained to protect a vulnerable human. He isn't reacting to fear or confusion. He's responding with calculated restraint. She guided Noah outside where she played a recording of a spoon hitting a table, followed by a short piece of oatmeal-scented rag briefly covered in strange-smelling vapor. Diesel lifted his head, sniffed and stared at the rag, then at Noah. No aggression. No agitation. Just concentrated observation. Later, Tessa asked Noah to reenact the morning of the incident. He described how Diesel had been in the doorway, how they fed Mia breakfast, how Diesel had locked eyes on the bowl before moving. That's not aggression, she explained. That's assessment. That's a highly conditioned reflex trust the handler, but protect the charge. He didn't see Rebecca as an enemy. He saw that she'd done something dangerous. His response was protective, not predatory. He was warning, not attacking. Noah exhaled tension evaporating. He reached over and patted Diesel's flank. "You did good, boy." Tessa added that in her 30 years of experience, few dogs displayed such restraint and control in a real threat scenario. She said the incident was textbook protection, nothing more, and that behavioral evaluators and a county review board would likely clear Diesel once they saw her report. Noah nodded relief, washing through him. For the first time since that morning, he believed Diesel was safe, that Diesel would be vindicated. But as they wrapped up, Tessa's voice hushed. Just know sometimes the very act of proving innocence puts more attention on the predator. Whoever laced that oatmeal knew what they were doing and why. Velvet gloves, poison gloves. Noah swallowed. Diesel's tail thumped once. The chill of that realization passed between them. He understood now that clearing Diesel legally was only part of the battle. Identifying the threat was the rest. He collected Tessa's detailed report, thanked her, and drove home with Diesel quietly easing into slumber behind him, their bond now deeper than ever. The house welcomed them with darkness and emptiness. Mia lay asleep upstairs, unaware that her guardian had been judged worthy again. Noah closed the garage, paused to give Diesel one more pat, and stepped into the house. The fight wasn't over, but now he had proof Diesel had been right. Noah returned home under the cover of dusk. Diesel by his side in the passenger seat, the German Shepherd maintaining a silent vigilance as if nothing had changed. The front door stood slightly ajar from earlier an oversight maybe, but too minor to register until now. He lifted Mia in one arm, she yawned against his shoulder, and scanned the living room. The usual clutter of toys and blankets remained untouched. If it hadn't been for Diesel's watchful stance, Noah might have thought peace returned. Instead, he felt the hairs on his neck prickle. He steered Mia to her crib, settled her down with no words, only softened motions, tucking the blanket around her. Diesel watched the entire time. Once Mia drifted into sleep, Noah slipped downstairs to search for more evidence. He headed to the umbrella stand where Melinda's purse had been left behind that chaotic morning. The bag hung there unclaimed, its leather scuffed by hurried handling. Noah lifted it off the hook, laid it on the kitchen island, and unzipped it. Inside were receipts, a half-eaten granola bar, a lipstick, gum wrappers, but something else lay there that made his stomach twist, a white bottle of medication. The label read Valdexa Correctional Facility Women's Division, Georgia. Prescribed medication from a prison that she never mentioned. His heart pounded. He pulled out the bottle, flipped it over, and found dosage instructions, one daily. A sense of dread washed over him. Why prison-issued medication? For what condition? He ran his finger over the printed letters and looked around the empty house. Diesel settled at his feet, eyes locked on him. Noah placed the bottle down and rifled deeper. Beneath an old bus ticket and a Target receipt, he found a yellowed newspaper clipping folded carelessly. Child starved to near death in custody. He recognized the original publication date over 12 years ago and unwrapped it to find a grainy photo of a small child with visible ribs and sunken eyes. The headline implicated the mother. The article recounted prolonged neglect. Noah's hands trembled. Melinda had a track record of harming vulnerable children, not just a motive, but a history. The act in his home wasn't sudden. It was replayed impulse rooted in her past. He closed his eyes and steadied himself. Diesel nudged his calf. Noah set the clipping aside and walked into the living room. He turned the purse upside down and heard a soft rattling. He tilted the bag. A small, rugged, external hard drive clanked onto the counter. He picked it up, wiped dust from its casing, and realized this could hold digital evidence, tracking records, locations, communications. He pulled out his phone, opened a notes app, and labeled a new entry, Melinda Timeline. He typed bullet points as he pieced together what he knew: prison medication, newspaper clipping about child neglect, nanny cam footage of poisoning, DEXA facility label. It formed a pattern. Melinda hadn't stumbled into their lives. She had planned. She followed them. He slid into his Hummer with Diesel in tow, the drive to a nearby cafe letting the evening sharpen in his mind. He loaded the hard drive into his laptop and scanned files it pinged with dozens of location logs, PDF docs, perhaps photos. He paused, realizing this would lead somewhere, maybe to other victims, maybe to a source of her malicious intent. Diesel whined softly from the back seat, urging his presence. Noah exhaled, placed the drive into his coat pocket, and typed a quick message to Detective Monroe. New evidence found. Hard drive with tracking logs. Will meet ASAP. He watched headlights pass the window with an ache. Inside, shadowed memory and method converged. Melinda Cross was not just a singular threat, she was calculated, embedded, dangerous. Diesel's paw tapped against the seat. Noah patted him and said under his breath, "We're going to unmask her completely." The following morning, the light through the blinds fell softer than usual, yet the heaviness in Noah's chest felt heavier than any storm. He stood in the pediatrician's waiting room, Diesel parked beside his boots, quiet and still, almost like a statue cast in instinct and devotion. Across the hall, Mia sat cradled on a blue plastic chair, her cheeks unusually pink. Her eyes glazed in quiet confusion, a pediatric nurse gently pressing a thermometer beneath her arm. Dr. Avery Feldman stepped out moments later, clipboard in hand, expression unreadable, but his eyes not avoiding Noah's. Her creatinine levels are elevated, the doctor began, not alarmingly so, but consistent with renal stress. That, combined with the low-grade fever points to toxin exposure, probably not a single incident. This may have happened before. Noah didn't breathe for a second, just stared at his daughter across the room, her curls sticking to her forehead as she leaned into the nurse's shoulder. "How recent?" he asked. Feldman's voice dropped. "Hard to say exactly, but the markers show it's not fresh. There was prior ingestion, likely in small, cumulative doses. She's been digesting this poison for days, maybe longer. Ethylene glycol isn't obvious in trace amounts. It builds. Slowly." Noah clenched his jaw, his mind reeling. Melinda didn't just try once. She'd been doing this gradually, methodically, hiding beneath lullabies and scheduled snack times. She had poisoned Mia before. Diesel looked up at Noah as if sensing the surge in tension. Noah nodded faintly, signaling he was okay, but neither of them were. Not really. Not while Melinda was still out there. He stepped outside after the appointment and called Detective Monroe directly. "What's the update?" Noah asked without introduction. "We tracked the hospital intake from the night of the bite," Monroe answered, voice clipped. "But the ID she used belonged to a woman who died 2 years ago. Stolen identity. She used it to check into urgent care, got her arm treated, and vanished. No forwarding address, no security footage outside the clinic, camera systems were down." Noah's voice turned to steel. "So, she's gone. We believe she left town within hours, possibly caught a bus eastbound. She paid in cash at the station. Surveillance only shows a woman in a hoodie, face mostly obscured. Likely her." Noah didn't respond right away. His pulse throbbed behind his eyes. "You had everything you needed to hold her, and now she's gone." "We're coordinating with other counties," Monroe offered, but it sounded thin-hollow. "You have a daughter to protect. Let us handle this." But Noah had stopped believing in someone else handling things the day he held Mia in his arms and realized only one person had reacted in time: a dog. Diesel, not law enforcement. Diesel, not a system of red tape. He hung up and started driving. Not to work, not to the precinct, but toward the edge of town where he could think, let Diesel stretch his legs and breathe away from hospital hallways and the glare of sterile light. At a quiet field near River Point Road, he parked, the Hummer stepped out, and let Diesel roam. The shepherd didn't run. He paced the perimeter scanning, always on duty. Noah leaned against the vehicle, pulling out his phone again. He opened the nanny cam footage for the 10th time, his thumb hovering over the moment Melinda stirred that bowl of oatmeal. He paused on her face, not Rebecca, but Melinda Cross, the same woman from the mugshot in the yellowed newspaper now filed in the sheriff's evidence log. Every feature matched, yet it was the blankness in her expression that unsettled him most. No guilt, no hesitation, just routine. Diesel returned to his side, brushing against his jeans. Noah sank to a crouch, running his fingers through Diesel's thick fur, grounding himself. "She's not done," he said quietly. "You know it, I know it." Diesel leaned closer. Noah took out his phone again and dialed Dr. Lauren Grant. "I need that hard drive reviewed," he said when she answered. "There's data we haven't opened yet, logs. Maybe it'll tell us where she's been." "I'll meet you at my clinic," she said. "Bring everything." He looked at the horizon, the sky just beginning to bruise with early dusk. He didn't say goodbye. He drove. Noah pulled into the back lot of Lauren Grant's clinic, with the hard drive tucked beneath his arm. Diesel by his side. The late afternoon sky hung low and slate gray, and the wind had turned sharp, pulling dry leaves into spirals across the pavement. Inside, Lauren had already prepared a workstation, but when Noah handed her the drive, she shook her head. "If we're digging deeper, we'll need someone with a better skill set for this," she said, and picked up her phone. That was how Jason Liu entered the picture ex-Army cyber operations, now working freelance as a security consultant. 2 hours later, he was sitting in Lauren's lab with a portable rig, fingers flying over the keyboard as he mirrored the drive. "Your nanny, Melinda, she wasn't just reckless, she was methodical," Jason muttered. "She had a pattern? Look here." He turned the screen toward Noah and tapped a folder named Daily Logs. Inside were dozens of entries, timestamps, Wi-Fi, pings app, check-ins, all logged from a burner phone. She connected to unsecured networks during walks with Mia, mostly in public spaces. Here's the interesting part. One of those connections popped up just yesterday, same MAC address, same configuration, different IP, but within 60 miles of here near a rest stop, just off I-85 toward the state line. Noah's pulse ticked. "Can you triangulate it?" Jason nodded, already typing. "Give me 20 minutes. 23 minutes later, they had coordinates. It's a bus depot converted into a 24-hour trucker stop. There's an attached motel and a diner," Jason said. "Looks like she's still close." Noah didn't speak. He just stood jaw-tight, brain clicking into military gear again. "She's not running," he said finally. "She's circling." Jason frowned. "Why would she stay nearby?" "Because she thinks she wasn't finished," Noah replied. "And maybe she's waiting for a moment when no one's watching." That night, Noah couldn't sleep. Every floorboard creak, every shifting tree shadow outside the window pulled his nerves taut. Mia had finally dozed off around 9, her small body curled in her comforter like a seashell. Diesel lay just outside her door, his ears alert even in rest. Noah sat in the kitchen, the baby monitor quiet beside him, his sidearm loaded and ready on the counter. Around 2:37 a.m., Diesel growled. It wasn't his usual low-throat warning. It was sharper, tighter, and it made the hair on Noah's arms lift instantly. He stood, eyes darting to the hallway where Diesel now stood stiff and angled toward the back of the house. Noah followed his gaze to the kitchen window. There, past the glass under the glow of the backyard floodlight, was movement. A figure, hooded, slipping through the garden gate. Noah didn't hesitate. He reached for the gun, motioned to Diesel to stay, and crossed the floor in 3 silent strides. From the other side of the glass, the figure stepped fully into the light. A woman, blonde, holding something in one hand, a flashlight maybe, or a bottle. Noah didn't wait to find out. He moved toward the side door, unlocked it, and stepped into the cold night with his breath catching in steam. Diesel followed silent shadow behind him. The wind pressed leaves against the siding. The figure now stood near the shed just feet from the corner where Mia's bedroom faced. "Stop!" Noah called, his voice sharp. "Hands where I can see them?" The woman froze. Slowly she turned. "It's not what you think," she said, her voice too calm for the hour too practiced. Diesel moved forward, but Noah signaled again, steadying the moment. "Melinda," he said, "drop whatever's in your hand." She held up both hands, flashlight clattering to the gravel. "I came to explain," she said, stepping closer. "I just needed you to hear, don't take another step." Noah's stance didn't shift. "You poisoned my child, lied your way into my home. Why the hell would I listen now?" Diesel snarled, not lunging but baring teeth. Melinda went still. Behind them, the sound of tires crunching gravel sent a sharp jolt through the silence. Red and blue lights splashed across the trees as two patrol cruisers pulled into the drive. Detective Monroe stepped out with her hand already on her holster. "Step away from the shed," she said, voice firm. "Now." Melinda turned eyes, wide lips parted, then slowly raised her hands again. One of the officers moved in to cuff her. Diesel's posture softened slightly, but his eyes stayed on her until she disappeared into the back of the cruiser. Monroe turned to Noah. "You okay?" Noah nodded once, but his heart was still racing. "She wasn't done," he said. "She came back to finish it." Monroe nodded grimly. "Looks like you were right, again." But Noah didn't feel right. He felt shaken. Not just by her return, but by how close she'd come again, how close she'd been to the shed to Mia's window, and how if Diesel hadn't sensed her first. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon on the following night, Noah's home was locked down tighter than a bunker. Every light outside was switched on, the security camera feed was live on his phone, and Diesel sat alert at Mia's bedroom door like a sentinel. Noah hadn't slept in over 30 hours. Not since the near break-in and the revelation that Melinda might be closer than anyone expected. Jason Liu had traced a ghost signal near the state line, but somehow she'd slipped away again. Noah didn't like being on the defensive, and as much as he wanted to shield Mia from the world, he couldn't shake the feeling that danger wasn't done with them yet. That instinct proved true just after 2:00 a.m. Diesel's growl rose first low, deep, and vibrating against the wood floor. Noah bolted upright from the couch pistol already in hand. Diesel padded silently to the back window, body stiff, ears up. Noah followed, heart racing. At first, he saw nothing. Then movement, a flicker of a figure near the shed. Slim build, light hoodie moving with practiced quiet. He moved quickly to Mia's room. She was still asleep, soft breath steady. "Stay with her," he whispered to Diesel, who gave one soft grunt before returning to her side. Noah took the long route, slipping out the front door and circling behind the house through the side gate. Moonlight reflected off something metallic in the figure's hand, a silver canister. He crept closer until his flashlight beam snapped on, illuminating the stranger's face. "Freeze!" he barked. Melinda stopped mid-step, her eyes wide but unflinching. "You shouldn't be raising that girl," she said coldly. "You don't know what's best for her." "I do." Noah tightened his grip on the weapon, dropped the can. She didn't. Instead, she took a step forward. "I came back to fix things. You weren't supposed to be home. You tried to poison my daughter," Noah said, his voice shaking with rage. "And now you're trespassing on my property with a chemical container. You don't get to talk about what's best for her." Melinda's eyes flashed. "She was mine for 6 months. She trusted me. You think she cries when you leave? She didn't cry with me." The words cut deeper than Noah expected. Still, he didn't move. Diesel did. The back door creaked open. Without a sound, the German shepherd trotted out and positioned himself between Noah and Melinda. He didn't snarl, he didn't bark, he just stood there, tall, steady, an immovable wall of muscle and instinct. Melinda hesitated. "I'm not afraid of your dog," she said. Diesel didn't budge. She raised the canister slightly, and that's when Diesel took one step forward. Just one. But it was enough to make her freeze. "Back up," Noah said. "Now." She didn't. But she also didn't advance. Instead, she looked at Diesel. "He's not dangerous," she muttered. "He's smart, that's the problem." The standoff lasted another 20 seconds. Then the flash of blue and red light spilled across the backyard. Tires crunched the gravel. A voice boomed from a megaphone. "Put your hands where we can see them." Melinda blinked, disoriented. Diesel stepped forward again. She stumbled backward and finally dropped the canister. Noah didn't lower his weapon. "That's enough," he said. "Stay down." Officers swarmed in seconds later, cuffing Melinda and reading her rights. She didn't resist, but her gaze never left Diesel. As they led her away, she turned to Noah and said, almost pleading, "You don't understand. She needed saving." Noah didn't reply. He walked straight to Diesel and knelt beside him. The dog's body finally relaxed, but his eyes were still locked on the place Melinda had stood. "Good boy," Noah whispered. "You didn't let her take one more step." From the back of the police car, Melinda screamed once, then silence. Inside the house, Mia stirred but didn't wake. Diesel returned to his post outside her door, and Noah stood in the hallway gripping the frame with both hands, finally allowing his knees to shake. The danger wasn't over, not yet. But tonight, the one who claimed to be a savior had revealed her true face, and the one labeled dangerous had been the only real protector all along. In the early dawn hours, the backyard scene looked eerily quiet, tear-streaked grass tire tracks in the gravel, and the faint echo of police radios fading into the sky. Detective Monroe had insisted on a thorough sweep before marking the scene safe. Noah stood nearby, clutching Diesel's leash, every muscle in his body tired but alert. When the evidence tech emerged from behind the shed, his face was pale. He held a small sealed container in one hand, store-bought oatmeal labeled MIA, March 14th, 2025, in childish handwriting, the lid still tight. Noah's breath caught. Monroe retrieved it, the gauze-gloved hand steady as she placed it in an evidence bag. "This isn't just an interrupted attempt," she said quietly. She came prepared to finish. Noah stared down at Diesel, whose ears twitched at the sound of plastic rustling. It was a sobering confirmation that Melinda had returned with intent. Not a rage-driven act, but a mission to complete the poisoning she had started. The container sat heavy in the bag as a final note, evil disguised as breakfast. The rest of the morning blurred. Crime scene tape slithered away, officers packed up gear, and neighbors once oblivious now peered apprehensively. Monroe pulled Noah aside. "We're bringing charges attempted poisoning, identity fraud, violating parole by crossing state lines." She paused. "Thanks to your dog, we caught her before anyone else got hurt." Noah nodded, voice lost in the mix of exhaustion and relief. Diesel whined softly and pressed against his leg. In the coming days, the legal system did what it could. Grand jury indicted Melinda Cross on multiple felonies. Court filings included toxicology reports, Nanny cam screen grabs the labeled oatmeal, and Tessa Ray's evaluation explaining Diesel's protective instincts. A state trooper called to inform Noah that Melinda would be held without bail on a straight path to conviction. Meanwhile, news spread. The story of a K9 hero protecting his handler's baby captured hearts across the state. Lucy's coffee shop talks Facebook shares and a flurry of local media requests. The state governor invited Noah and Diesel to the Capitol ceremony. On a crisp spring afternoon, Diesel donned his custom vest and stood with statuesque calm as the Colonel General pinned a polished medal reading K9 of Valor onto his harness. The line of applause that followed echoed louder than any siren of war. Diesel didn't bark or whine. He simply looked to Noah, waited for the nod, then sat dignity intact. Mia, clutching a teddy bear, reached up and kissed his jowls, and Welch, the press photographer, captured the moment father-daughter dog center stage in a tableau of quiet triumph. Later, back home, the house felt different. The fear had evaporated into memory. Mia giggled as she followed Diesel through the yard, tossing frisbees that arced like golden promises. Noah leaned against the porch railing, coffee warm in his hand, and felt gratitude unfold inside him in a way he hadn't in years. He had enlisted once to protect others. Now he had fought a personal battle and won. He looked at Diesel, thick coat shining, tail wagging slow and steady, and whispered, "We made it, boy." Mia ran up the steps, muddy knees, but bright eyes, her laughter a soundtrack of renewal. In that moment, Noah realized peace wasn't a place, it was a promise upheld by vigilance, love, and a dog's unwavering spirit. And for them, this was the true new beginning. If this story moved you, consider subscribing to stay with us for the next unforgettable journey. Which part of the story hit you the hardest? And where are you watching from? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your take.